What if the most charming person in the room was also the most dangerous? Ted Bundy smiled, shook hands, and looked people straight in the eye, all while hiding a secret so dark it paralyzed the nation. He wasn't just a serial killer. He was a master illusionist, America's most terrifying chameleon. In this video, we're diving deep into the mind behind the monster. How does someone become evil enough to murder dozens of women while working at a suicide hotline? It isn't just a story of murder, it's a case study in manipulation, deception, and pure psychological horror. And by the end, you'll realize the scariest part about Ted Bundy isn't how many people he killed, it's how many people believed he was completely normal. Ted Bundy's life began with a cover-up. Born in 1946, his birth was considered shameful. To protect her image, Ted's mother, Louise, allowed her parents to raise him as their son. Ted was told his mother was his sister. For years, this deception shaped his sense of identity. When he discovered the truth, no one knows when he was devastated. He felt manipulated, abandoned, and humiliated, and he wouldn't forget that feeling. Psychologists believe this early betrayal was more than emotional. It became a blueprint for his life. Bundy's childhood wasn't filled with chaos. He wasn't beaten daily or starved. But his world was cold, confusing, and secretive. His grandfather, possibly his biological father, was a volatile man. Some said he was abusive, others swore he was kind. Ted learned a key survival tactic: tell people what they want to hear. Behind his smile was a child quietly collecting masks. Even then, the darkness showed. At age 3, he was obsessed with knives. At age 10, he dug spike-filled traps in the woods. He once surrounded his aunt with knives in her sleep. These weren't pranks, they were early rehearsals. Signs of someone learning to control, dominate, and terrify without consequence. He also grew up with a warped view of sex and violence. He'd later blame his addiction to violent pornography as the fuel for his fantasies, claiming he found the magazines in the trash as a boy. But here's the truth. Millions of boys grow up with hard lives, broken families, and access to dark material. They don't all become serial killers. What made Ted different was how he weaponized his pain. By the late 1960s, Bundy had perfected the role he would play for the rest of his life: the charming, ambitious young man with a bright future. He studied psychology at the University of Washington, not because he wanted to help people, but because he wanted to understand how they worked. He worked at a suicide crisis hotline, helping desperate strangers find hope, while secretly nurturing fantasies of control and death. One woman he worked with was Anne Rule, who later wrote The Stranger Beside Me. She described him as kind, thoughtful, even heroic. She had no idea Bundy was in a relationship with a wealthy young woman, Stephanie Brooks. He admired her class, her poise, and her family's wealth. When she dumped him, it shattered his fragile ego. He wasn't just heartbroken, he was insulted. Years later, he manipulated her into taking him back, and then, without warning, he ghosted her. It wasn't romance, it was revenge, and the women he would later target all looked like Stephanie. Long dark hair, parted in the middle. It wasn't random, it was a ritual. By the early 72nd, Bundy was volunteering on political campaigns, studying law, and writing reports for crime commissions. Imagine this: a man who would soon be stalking, raping, and killing women was advising the police about how to protect them. He didn't just fool strangers, he fooled everyone. Even his long-term girlfriend, Elizabeth Klapfer, had no clue. They lived together, raised her daughter together, went to church together. But late at night, Ted would disappear. She started noticing strange things: crutches in the car, a meat cleaver in the drawer. She went to the police. They told her she was being paranoid. Bundy's charm wasn't just powerful, it was a shield. In 1974, Ted Bundy stopped fantasizing and started killing. His attacks were surgical, his methods efficient. No rage, no mess, just control. He'd wear a fake cast, approach women on campuses or at parks. "Hey, can you help me carry something to my car?" Then, once they were near the car, bam, he'd strike. He removed the front seat of his Volkswagen Beetle to hide their bodies, drove them to secluded areas, tortured, murdered, returned to visit the corpses. He confessed to necrophilia, to keeping trophies. In some cases, he decapitated the victims and kept their heads. His spree spread like wildfire. Seattle, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho. Victims vanished from campuses, parks, shopping malls. Police were lost. Why? Because there were no national databases, no interagency coordination, no way to connect the dots across states. In July 1974, he abducted 2 women in broad daylight at Lake Sammamish Park in front of witnesses. He used his real name, introduced himself as Ted. Finally, a break. Witnesses described him, his car, his method. A sketch circulated. Still, nothing. Even when his girlfriend called the tip line, police were skeptical. Ted, the law student? No way. Bundy was invisible, hiding in plain sight. Then came Carol Durrance. She was approached by a man claiming to be a police officer, said her car had been broken into. Bundy lured her into his car, but she fought back, kicked, screamed, escaped. She reported him, later picked him out of a lineup. That led to his first arrest. In 1975, police stopped him. In his car, handcuffs, an ice pick, pantyhose, mask, rope. He was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to prison in Utah. But Bundy had a plan. In 1977, he escaped custody, not once, but twice. The first time, he jumped out a courthouse window. The second, he crawled through a hole in his jail cell ceiling. He fled across the country. And then, things got even worse. In Florida, stripped of his normal life and spiraling, Bundy lost all control. On January 15, 1978, he broke into a sorority house at Florida State University. In just 15 minutes, he beat and strangled 4 women. 2 died. One survivor had bite marks on her body. Then, just blocks away, he attacked another woman in her apartment, shattering her jaw. Weeks later, he abducted a 12-year-old girl, Kimberly Leach. That was the final straw. He was caught on February 15th, pulled over during a routine stop. The charm was gone. His face was gaunt, his eyes cold. Bundy's trial for the Chi Omega murders was the first televised criminal trial in US history, and he turned it into a stage show. He defended himself, argued with judges, smiled for the cameras, proposed to a witness mid-trial on air. But the evidence was overwhelming. A key piece? The bite mark left on one victim's body. Forensic dentistry confirmed it was a match. He was sentenced to death, again and again. Still, Bundy wasn't done manipulating. On death row, he granted interviews, claimed he'd been corrupted by pornography, blamed media, society, anything but himself. He confessed to over 30 murders, but always with a twist, never directly, always in the third person. The killer felt this, the killer did that. It wasn't remorse, it was a final power move. He knew families were watching. He wanted to control what they knew. Even in his last moments, he kept some victims' names secret, just to stay important. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Outside the prison, a crowd gathered. They set off fireworks, chanted, "Burn, Bundy, burn." Ted Bundy's case transformed law enforcement forever. Because of him, the FBI created VICAP, a national database for violent crime. Behavioral profiling evolved into a powerful investigative tool. He was one of the first killers analyzed by the FBI's behavioral science unit. They found something chilling. He scored high on psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, the dark triad, but he was also highly organized, intelligent, strategic. That combination, calculated evil and emotional emptiness, made him a new kind of monster. Bundy also became a pop culture phenomenon. Books, movies, interviews, even fan letters from women who thought he was misunderstood. Why? Because he looked normal. And that terrified people more than anything. Ted Bundy was more than a killer. He was a warning. He showed us that evil isn't always loud, ugly, or obvious. Sometimes it smiles, holds the door, pays its taxes. He was a predator who weaponized charm, a master of manipulation who wore decency like a costume. He killed dozens, maybe over 100. But what makes him unforgettable is that no one saw it coming. If this video made you rethink how you judge people, subscribe. We cover more twisted truths, real psychological profiles, and stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who looks just like everyone else.